I need to tell this story before I lose my nerve or before someone stops me. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I keep looking over my shoulder even though I'm alone in my apartment with the door locked and the curtains drawn. What I saw 3 months ago changed everything I thought I knew about science, ethics, and what happens behind closed doors at one of America's most respected institutions. My name is David Torres, I'm 35 years old, and until last month I worked as a night janitor at Whitmore University in Massachusetts. You've definitely heard of Whitmore. It's one of those Ivy League adjacent schools that's always in the news for producing Nobel Prize winners, groundbreaking research, and graduating the children of presidents and billionaires. It has that old money prestige, those Gothic buildings covered in ivy, those manicured lawns and secret societies that make it look like something out of a movie. I didn't go to Whitmore. I didn't go to any university. I got my get at 19 after dropping out of high school to help support my family when my dad got sick. I've worked a dozen different jobs over the years: construction, retail, food service, whatever paid the bills. The janitorial position at Whitmore was actually one of the better jobs I'd had. It paid decently, had benefits, and the work was straightforward. Plus, I worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which meant I rarely interacted with students or faculty. I could just put on my headphones, clean the buildings, and collect my paycheck. I'd been working at Whitmore for about 2 years when this all started. I was assigned to the Science Complex, a cluster of interconnected buildings on the north end of campus where they did research in biology, chemistry, physics, and various other fields. My job was to clean offices, classrooms, and common areas. The actual laboratories were cleaned by specialized staff during the day because of all the safety protocols and equipment concerns. The Science Complex was built in stages over about 70 years, so it's this weird architectural mishmash. Some parts are beautiful old stone buildings from the 1940s, other parts are modern glass and steel additions from the 2000s. They're all connected by a maze of corridors and tunnels, some of which run underground to allow for movement between buildings during harsh New England winters. I'd been working there long enough that I knew the layout pretty well, but there were still areas I'd never been to. Some wings were restricted, requiring special keycard access that my standard janitorial credentials didn't provide. Some basements and sub-basements I'd never had any reason to visit. The complex was huge, and my assignment covered enough square footage that I was always busy without needing to explore areas outside my designated zones. Everything changed on November 3rd of last year. It was a Tuesday night, unseasonably cold for early November, and I'd arrived for my shift at the usual time. My supervisor, a guy named Phil who'd been working at Whitmore for like 20 years, pulled me aside before I headed out with my cleaning cart. "Hey David, I need you to cover some extra areas tonight," he said, looking at his tablet. "Jenny called in sick, so we're short-staffed. I'm going to need you to handle the Grayson Building basement in addition to your normal route." The Grayson Building was one of the older structures in the Science Complex. A 3-story stone building that housed the biology department. I'd cleaned the upper floors plenty of times but had never been sent to the basement before. "Sure, no problem," I said. "What's down there?" "Storage, mostly. Old equipment, archive files, that kind of thing. It should be pretty quick. Just empty the trash, sweep the floors, wipe down any surfaces that look dusty. Here's the key card that'll get you in." He handed me a temporary access card and added my name to the log for that area. I loaded up my cart and headed over to Grayson, doing my usual routine on the upper floors first: offices, classrooms, bathrooms, hallways. Everything normal. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I finally made my way down to the basement. The stairwell entrance was through a heavy door marked basement level, authorized personnel only, that required the key card Phil had given me. I swiped the card, heard the lock click, and pulled open the door to reveal a dimly lit stairwell heading down. The temperature dropped noticeably as I descended. The stairwell was old, with worn concrete steps and painted cinder block walls that looked like they hadn't been updated since the building was constructed. At the bottom was another door, also requiring keycard access. I swiped the card again and entered the basement. It was a long corridor with fluorescent lights that flickered slightly, giving everything a kind of sickly, uneven illumination. There were doors along both sides, most of them closed, with small windows reinforced with wire mesh. The air smelled stale and slightly chemical, like old disinfectant mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. I started at one end of the corridor, checking which rooms needed cleaning. Most were exactly what Phil had described: storage rooms full of old lab equipment, filing cabinets with archived research papers, boxes of outdated textbooks. Dusty but not particularly dirty. I emptied a few trash cans, swept the floors, and moved methodically down the hallway. About halfway down the corridor, I noticed that the layout seemed odd. According to the building's dimensions, there should have been more space than what I was seeing. The corridor I was in seemed to end at a wall, but based on the footprint of the building above, there should have been more basement extending beyond that wall. I walked to the end of the corridor and examined the wall more carefully. It looked like it had been added later, newer concrete and paint compared to the rest of the basement. And there, partially hidden behind a utility shelf, was a door. Not a regular door, more like a heavy security door with a serious lock mechanism and a keycard reader that looked much more sophisticated than the standard ones used throughout the building. I knew I should just finish my work and leave. This was clearly a restricted area that I wasn't supposed to access. But curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out the temporary keycard Phil had given me and swiped it, not really expecting it to work. To my surprise, the light on the reader turned green, and I heard multiple locks disengaging. The door opened about an inch, stopped by its own weight. I stood there for a long moment, my heart starting to beat faster, debating whether I should just close it and walk away. I should have walked away. Instead, I pulled the door open and stepped through. Beyond the door was another stairwell. This one leading down to what must have been a sub-basement. The construction was different here, newer, more industrial. The walls were painted white, the lighting was better, and there was a ventilation system humming that I could hear and feel. This wasn't abandoned storage. This was an active facility. I descended the stairs slowly, and at the bottom found myself in another corridor. This one had doors with actual labels: Observation Room 1, Specimen Storage, Prep Room, Surgical Suite A, Recovery 1-5. What the hell was this place? I walked quietly down the corridor, looking through the windows in the doors. The observation room was dark, but I could see it was set up like a medical facility, with computer monitors and equipment for what looked like surveillance. Specimen storage had the keycard reader with the red light locked even with my apparently high-level temporary access card. Then I got to Recovery 3 and looked through the window. There was someone in there. A person, lying in what looked like a hospital bed, connected to various machines and 4 lines. The lights were dim, but I could see enough to tell it was a young man, maybe early 20s, apparently unconscious or asleep. My first thought was that maybe this was some kind of medical research facility, maybe studying sleep disorders or something. But why would it be hidden in a sub-basement? Why wasn't it in the university hospital? I moved to the next recovery room and saw another person, this time a young woman, also unconscious and connected to machines. Same setup in Recovery 5, another patient, another mystery. I should have left then. I should have gone back upstairs, finished my shift, and pretended I'd never seen any of this. But I was completely freaked out and needed to understand what I was looking at. There was an office door at the end of the corridor labeled Research Director. I tried the handle unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The office was neat and organized, with a desk, computer, filing cabinets, and bookshelves lined with medical and scientific texts. The computer was locked, but there were papers on the desk. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, being careful not to turn on the overhead lights. The documents on the desk were research notes. I started reading, and what I read made my blood run cold. This wasn't a legitimate medical study. This was something else entirely. The notes described what they called neurological modification experiments. They were using something called deep neural mapping and targeted synaptic intervention to fundamentally alter how people's brains worked. According to the notes, they were trying to enhance cognitive abilities, modify emotional responses, and even implant or remove specific memories. The subjects weren't volunteers. The notes referred to them as candidates who had been recruited from vulnerable populations. I found a list of names with brief descriptions: Subject 27, homeless, no family contact, recruited from Boston shelter. Subject 31, international student, visa expired, no local support network. Subject 33, foster system, aged out, no permanent address. They were experimenting on people who wouldn't be missed. People who had fallen through society's cracks. People like I easily could have been if my life had gone slightly differently. I felt sick. I took pictures of everything I could with my phone. My hands shaking so badly I had to retake several photos. I photographed the notes, the subject list, medical charts that were in a tray on the desk, everything. Then I heard voices. Someone was coming down the stairs to the sub-basement. Multiple people, talking in low voices. I panicked, looked around the office frantically for somewhere to hide. There was a closet in the corner. I squeezed inside, pulling the door almost closed but leaving it open just a crack so I could see and hear. Two people entered the corridor, a man and a woman, both wearing white lab coats. The man was probably in his 50s, gray hair, authoritative bearing. The woman was younger, maybe 30s, carrying a tablet. "How's Subject 35 responding to the new protocol?" the man asked as they walked past the office door. "Better than expected, Dr. Reeves," the woman replied. "The neural mapping shows significant integration of the targeted memory structures. We should be able to begin behavioral conditioning by the end of the week." "Excellent. And the cognitive enhancement trials?" "Mixed results. Subject 28 is showing the improvements we hope for: increased processing speed, enhanced memory retention. But Subject 30 is experiencing complications. Seizures, dissociative episodes. We might need to terminate that trial." They stopped outside one of the recovery rooms, and I heard a door open. "Terminate means what exactly?" Dr. Reeves asked. "Standard protocol," the woman said. "We'll complete the neural wipe to remove any memories of the program, then release them back to where we found them with a plausible cover story for their absence. The neural wipe usually causes some lasting cognitive impairment, but nothing that would prompt investigation. And if the neural wipe fails?" There was a pause. Then the woman said, quietly, "Then we move to permanent termination and disposal." I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. They were talking about murder. About killing people to cover up their experiments. They moved on down the corridor, checking on other subjects, discussing the experiments in clinical, detached language like they were talking about lab rats instead of human beings. I stayed frozen in that closet for what felt like hours but was probably only about 30 minutes, until I heard them leave back up the stairs. I waited another 15 minutes, then carefully emerged from the closet. I needed to get out of there, but I also felt like I needed more evidence. I took pictures of everything else I could find in the office: more files, more notes, anything that would help prove what was happening here. Then I left, moving as quickly and quietly as I could. I went back up to the main basement, then up to the ground floor, and then I literally ran to my car. I didn't finish my shift. I didn't check out with security. I just left. I sat in my car in the parking lot, shaking, not knowing what to do. I had evidence of something horrible on my phone, but what was I supposed to do with it? Go to the police? Would they even believe me? Would they investigate, or would they just call the university, which would deny everything and probably make the evidence disappear? I drove home and didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat on my couch, looking at the photos on my phone, trying to process what I'd discovered. The next day, I called in sick to work. And the day after that. I knew I couldn't go back there. Couldn't pretend everything was normal, couldn't walk past that building knowing what was happening underneath it. After about a week, my supervisor Phil called me. "David, man, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need to take a leave of absence?" "I can't come back," I said. "I'm sorry. I'm quitting." "What? Why? Did something happen?" I can't. I'm sorry." I hung up. A few days later, I got a certified letter from Whitmore's HR department acknowledging my resignation and reminding me of the confidentiality agreements I'd signed when I was hired. Standard stuff about not disclosing private information about students or research. But there was something else in the envelope. A separate letter, on different letterhead, from Whitmore's Office of Research Security. It was brief and to the point. "Dear Mr. Torres, it has come to our attention that during your final shift at Whitmore University, you may have accessed areas outside your authorized zones. We want to remind you that any information obtained from restricted research facilities is considered highly confidential and protected under both university policy and federal law. Unauthorized disclosure of such information could result in severe legal consequences, including criminal prosecution. We trust that you understand the seriousness of these confidentiality obligations. If you have any questions about your obligations, please contact our office immediately." They knew. They knew I'd been down there, and they were threatening me to keep quiet about it. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I had evidence of human experimentation, of people being held against their will and experimented on, possibly killed to cover it up. But I also had a letter threatening me with criminal prosecution if I told anyone. For weeks, I did nothing. I just stayed in my apartment, barely eating, barely sleeping, jumping at every unexpected sound. I kept expecting the police to show up and arrest me, or worse, for someone from Whitmore to show up and make sure I stayed quiet permanently. Finally, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just sit on this information while people were being tortured and potentially killed. I made contact with a journalist who specialized in investigative reporting on scientific misconduct. I did it carefully, anonymously at first, just describing what I'd found without identifying myself or the university. The journalist was interested but wanted more information, wanted to verify the story before going public with it. We arranged a meeting, in person, in a public place. I brought my phone with all the photos I'd taken. But the night before the meeting, my apartment was broken into. I wasn't home. I'd been staying with a friend because I was too paranoid to sleep in my own place. When I came back the next morning, the place had been ransacked. My laptop was gone. My backup hard drive was gone. And most importantly, my phone was gone. All the evidence I'd collected was gone. I was devastated. I'd been careful, but not careful enough. I should have uploaded the photos to the cloud, should have made multiple backups, should have done a lot of things differently. But I'd been so scared and overwhelmed that I hadn't thought clearly. I still met with the journalist and told them everything, but without the photos, there was no way to verify my story. It was just my word against one of the most prestigious universities in the country. The journalists said they'd look into it, try to find other ways to verify the information, but they didn't sound optimistic. A few days later, I was followed. I noticed the same car behind me on multiple occasions, in different parts of the city. Once, when I was walking home from the grocery store, I saw someone watching my building from across the street. When I looked directly at them, they turned and walked away quickly. I realized I wasn't safe. These people, whoever they were, whether it was the university or some private security they'd hired, weren't going to just let this go. They'd already broken into my apartment. Who knew what they'd do next? That's when I decided to leave. I packed a bag, withdrew cash from my bank account, and left Massachusetts. I've been moving around ever since, staying with different friends in different states, never in one place for too long. I know this sounds paranoid. I know it sounds like I'm overreacting. But I saw what I saw. I read those notes. I heard those doctors talking about terminating subjects who didn't respond to their experiments. These aren't people who would hesitate to make one former janitor disappear if he became a liability. The worst part is knowing that those people are still there. Those subjects in the recovery rooms, having their brains experimented on, their memories altered or erased. Subject 28, Subject 30, Subject 35, and however many others. They're still there, and I couldn't save them. I couldn't stop what was happening to them. I've tried to find information about missing persons who match the descriptions I saw in those files. Homeless people who disappeared from Boston shelters around the times mentioned in the notes. International students who dropped out of contact. Foster kids who aged out of the system and then vanished. The problem is, these are exactly the kinds of people whose disappearances don't get much attention. There are some cases that might match, but nothing definitive. I've also tried to research Dr. Reeves, the man I heard in the sub-basement. There are 3 professors named Reeves at Whitmore, but only one in the medical/biological sciences, Dr. Jonathan Reeves, a neuroscientist who's published extensively on neural plasticity and memory formation. He's considered a leading expert in his field, has won numerous awards, brings in millions in research grants. His most recent published research is on therapeutic memory modification for PTSD patients. The published work describes voluntary trials with full consent, institutional review board oversight, all the proper ethical safeguards. But I wonder how much of that published research is built on data from the experiments I discovered. How much of his prestigious reputation is built on the suffering of subjects who never consented to any of it? I've thought about going public with this story, posting it online with all the details, naming the university and Dr. Reeves directly. But I'm scared of the consequences. I have no evidence anymore. It would be my word against theirs, And they have lawyers and resources and reputation. They could sue me for defamation. They could have me prosecuted for breaking into restricted areas, for violating confidentiality agreements, for theft of proprietary information. Or they could just make me disappear, like they apparently did with the subjects who didn't work out. So I'm posting this story without naming the specific university or the researcher, changing enough details to give myself some plausible deniability if it ever comes back to me. But the core of the story is true. Every word of what I saw, what I heard, what I found, that's all real. Somewhere in Massachusetts, at a prestigious university, there is a sub-basement facility where human experimentation is happening. People are being held against their will, having their brains physically altered, their memories erased or implanted, their cognitive abilities modified through procedures they never consented to. And when the experiments fail, those people are either brain damaged and released, or they disappear entirely. And the people responsible are respected scientists, funded by major research grants, publishing papers in prestigious journals, training the next generation of researchers. During the day, they teach classes and attend faculty meetings and maintain the appearance of legitimate scholarship. At night, they go down to their secret facility and play God with people's minds. I don't know what to do with this information. I've told a journalist who couldn't verify it. I posted it here, anonymously, with enough details changed that I hope it can't be traced back to me. Maybe someone else knows something, has seen something similar, can add to the picture. Maybe someone with more resources and courage than me can investigate and expose what's really happening. Or maybe the story will just disappear into the internet, another unverifiable conspiracy theory that people read and then dismiss. But I needed to tell it. I needed to put it out there, even if I can't prove it, even if no one believes me. Because those people in those recovery rooms deserve someone to know what's happening to them. They deserve someone to give a damn about their suffering. I was just a janitor. I wasn't supposed to see anything. I was supposed to clean the floors, empty the trash, and go home. I was supposed to be invisible, the kind of person who's in the building but not really noticed, not really considered important enough to matter. But I saw. I know. And now you know too. I don't know if that changes anything. I don't know if it helps anyone. But at least the information is out there now, in some form, in some place where it can't be completely erased. I worked as a night janitor at a prestigious university, and what I found in the research lab basement will haunt me forever. Not just because of what I saw, but because I couldn't stop it. Because those people are still there, still suffering, still being experimented on by doctors who see them as specimens rather than human beings. And because part of me knows that if my life had gone just a little bit differently, if I'd been a little more desperate, a little more vulnerable, a little more alone, I could have been one of them. Subject 36, hooked up to machines in a hidden room, having my brain rewired by people who think the advancement of science justifies any cost. That's what I can't stop thinking about. Not just that it happened, but that it could have been me. If you work at a university, especially in research facilities, pay attention. Look for the spaces that don't quite make sense, the areas that seem to have more security than they should, the people who come and go at odd hours. Ask questions about what research is really being conducted. And if you're vulnerable, if you're homeless, if you're an undocumented immigrant, if you're alone with no support system, be careful. Be very careful about who offers you help, especially if that help comes from researchers or medical professionals affiliated with major institutions. Because not everyone in a white lab coat is trying to heal people. Some of them are trying to use people. I wish I could give you a happy ending to the story. I wish I could tell you that I found a way to expose the facility and rescue the subjects and bring the researchers to justice. But this is the real world, and sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes they have too much power, too many resources, too much institutional protection. All I can do is tell the story and hope that somehow, someday, someone with more power than I have will investigate and shut that place down. Until then, those people are still there, in that sub-basement, in those recovery rooms, having their minds torn apart and rebuilt by people who think human consciousness is just another puzzle to solve. And I have to live with the knowledge that I couldn't save them. That's the part that haunts me forever.